June 7th, 1944. Normandy. A Sherman tank sits frozen behind a hedgerow as a German Panzer rolls into view just 200 yards away. Inside the turret, a 24-year-old major knows the rules of this fight, and they're stacked against him. The enemy fires first. One hit will turn his tank into a burning coffin. His gun isn't supposed to penetrate German armor, and his crew has almost no combat experience. He has 10 seconds to act. What he decides in that moment won't just determine who survives. It will challenge everything Allied tank crews believed was possible on the Normandy battlefield. The problem wasn't courage, it was the machine. The Sherbrooke Fusiliers had landed on Juno Beach just 18 hours earlier. Out of 11 Sherman tanks that made it off the sand, 3 were already burning by dawn. The Germans weren't retreating. They were counterattacking, and in far greater numbers than the Allies had expected. Radley Walters now commanded a squadron of 8 Shermans, armed with 75mm guns that couldn't penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor at any range. The math was brutal. A Tiger could destroy a Sherman from over 2,000 yards, long before the Sherman could even fight back. To destroy a German tank, a Sherman had to close to within 500 yards and strike from the sides or rear, a distance few ever managed. The Panzer IV was smaller than a Tiger, yet faster, tougher, and manned by seasoned crews who had been fighting since Poland. Radley Walters had graduated from Bishop's University just 4 years earlier. His regiment had been infantry until January 1942, when the Canadian Army suddenly transitioned them into armored warfare. None of the men had ever operated a tank. They trained from manuals and whatever equipment arrived from England, praying it would be enough once they crossed the Channel. It still wasn't enough. The first week in Normandy proved just how deadly the battlefield had become. The Sherbrooke Fusiliers pushed inland alongside the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, only to face relentless counterattacks from German panzer divisions. Panthers, Tigers, even older Panzer IVs could strike Shermans from distances where their 75mm guns were nearly useless. Allied tank crews called it getting brewed up. The Sherman's gasoline engine could ignite at the slightest hit, leaving crews mere seconds to escape. By mid-June, Radley Walters had learned the pattern. German tanks always spotted first and fired first. Survival depended on one thing: speed, terrain, and striking the enemy's flank before their gun could turn. The Panzer IV's turret froze in place. Radley Walters knew exactly what that meant. In the next 10 seconds, Caribou's crew would either destroy this tank or become another casualty in the Normandy hedgerows. His gunner waited, ready. Across from them, the German commander was likely calculating the same things: range, elevation, whether to fire high explosive or armor-piercing rounds. Then Walters gave the command. The Sherman's 75mm gun thundered. The Panzer shuddered, black smoke erupting from its engine deck. No crew emerged. Radley Walters had just scored his first kill. It wouldn't be his last. He had no way of knowing that he would survive 3 more tanks destroyed under him, suffer 2 wounds, rack up 18 confirmed kills, Or that decades later, he might realize he had faced Germany's most famous tank ace. For now, all he knew was that he was alive and that the war was far from over. The Normandy campaign had become a grinding battle of attrition. For 56 relentless days, the Sherbrooke Fusiliers fought through the hedgerows south of Caen with no relief. By June 10th, Radley Walters had destroyed his second tank, a Panther that had pinned down an infantry company. His third came just 4 days later, during the push toward Carpiquet airfield. Not every squadron commander was so lucky. By late June, the regiment had lost 23 Shermans. 11 loaders were dead. Most never even saw what hit them. German tanks used the hedgerows like fortresses, lying in defilade so that only their turrets were visible. Fire, reverse, relocate. By the time Allied crews spotted the muzzle flash, the shell was already racing at 3,000 feet per second. The Tiger I weighed 70 tons, its frontal armor a solid 120 millimeters. The Sherman's 75 millimeter armor-piercing rounds could penetrate only 79 millimeters at point-blank range. Against the Tiger's front plate, every shot simply bounced off. Allied intelligence had badly underestimated the number of Panthers and Tigers the Germans were deploying. Before the invasion, Allied intelligence had assumed Tigers would be rare, heavy breakthrough tanks produced in limited numbers. Instead, entire battalions poured into Normandy. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitler Youth received dozens, all manned by fanatical crews who had been training since 1942. Radley Walters had no choice but to learn fast. His tactics were ruthless but effective. Use the terrain, never silhouette on a ridge, move quickly, and let one platoon draw fire while another flanked. Strike the sides or rear, where armor was 60 to 80 millimeters, thick enough to stop rifle rounds, thin enough for a 75 millimeter shell at close range. By early July, Walters had destroyed 6 German tanks. The regiment promoted him to major and gave him permanent command of a squadron. He was just 24, leading crews mostly aged 19 or 20. They called him Rad. He insisted they sleep whenever possible, even in the afternoon, even when they mocked him. Within a month, they understood why. Exhaustion killed more men than enemy fire. The Sherman had strengths the German tanks lacked. It was reliable. Mechanical failures were rare, and when they happened, field mechanics could repair them in hours. Panthers and Tigers, by contrast, spent half their service life sidelined for maintenance. Parts shortages, transmission failures, and over-engineered systems breaking under battlefield conditions. The Sherman was also faster, reaching 30 miles per hour on roads and 20 across rough terrain. A Panther could barely manage 15. Speed gave Radley Walters options. He could choose when to engage, disengage when outgunned, and flank while the enemy was distracted. But speed and reliability meant nothing if the Germans saw him first. Their optics were superior, their gunners trained for years, and their crews brought experience few allies could match. Many had already fought on the Eastern Front in Russia. They knew how to kill tanks. They had been doing it since 1941. On July 8th, during the assault on Caen, Radley Walters led his squadron against German positions near Biron. For 3 hours, artillery had reduced the village to rubble. Infantry reported light resistance. Then the Panthers appeared. 4 of them, hull down behind the debris. In the first 30 seconds, Walters lost 2 Shermans. A shell struck his own tank's turret side, missing his head by just 8 inches and killing his loader instantly. The crew scrambled. Smoke grenades, dive for cover, pray the machine guns didn't catch them. He watched Caribou burn, his first tank. 11 confirmed kills, gone. By nightfall, the regiment issued him another Sherman. He named it Caribou II. Within a week, he had added 2 more German tanks to his count. But Normandy was changing. Allied intelligence reported the arrival of a new German unit, the heavy SS Panzer Battalion 101, all Tigers. Commanded by Germany's highest-scoring tank ace, 143 confirmed kills. His name was Michael Wittmann. By 1944, he had become a legend in Germany. On June 13th, at Villers-Bocage, he destroyed more than 24 British tanks and vehicles in just 15 minutes. Ambushing the lead elements of the 7th Armored Division, his Tiger tore through everything in sight and withdrew before Allied artillery could respond. German propaganda immortalized him as the Black Baron, the invincible tank commander. By early August, Wittmann led the 3rd Company of the heavy SS Panzer Battalion 101. His Tiger bore the number 07, and he had survived 3 years of relentless combat. Poland, France, the Eastern Front, Normandy. Most German tank aces were dead by their 2nd year. Wittmann kept racking up kills, 143 confirmed, dozens more unconfirmed. Radley Walters had never heard the name. Allied intelligence didn't brief crews about individual commanders, only tank types, their capabilities and weaknesses. Whether the 75mm gun could penetrate at various ranges. The answer was almost always no. Yet Walters kept destroying German armor. By late July, his count reached 11, then 13. He had learned the Tiger's vulnerabilities and how to survive encounters that would have killed most. Every German tank had weak points. The air intake louvers on the rear deck, the thinner armor at the turret ring, the lower hull sides at close range. The key was surviving long enough to exploit them. In mid-July, the Sherbrooke Fusiliers received 2 Sherman Fireflies. These were standard Shermans retrofitted with British 17-pounder guns, longer barrels, high-velocity, armor-piercing rounds capable of punching through a Tiger's frontal armor at realistic combat ranges. Finally, the Allies had a weapon that could take on German heavy tanks head-on. Walters kept the Fireflies at the back of his formations. Their longer barrels made them stand out, and German gunners quickly learned to target them first, eliminate the one tank in each unit that could truly threaten them, then deal with the rest at leisure. The Fireflies stayed hidden, used terrain, and struck only when absolutely necessary. Slowly but surely, a squadron's kill count began to climb. By now, Radley Walters had destroyed a Panther near Tir-la-Campagne and a Tiger south of Caen. His gunners were improving. Faster target acquisition, sharper range estimation. The crews that survived the brutal first month in Normandy had become deadly. They knew the terrain. They understood German tactics. They knew how to stay alive. On August 7th, Allied Command launched Operation Totalize. The goal: break through German lines south of Caen, reach the Falaise Gap, and cut off the German 7th Army before it could retreat east. The assault involved 4 Canadian and British armored divisions, hundreds of tanks, thousands of infantry, and heavy bomber support. The Germans were ready. Weeks of preparation had fortified defensive positions with minefields, anti-tank guns, and strategic panzer positions. Heavy SS Panzer Battalion 101 moved into place. 7 Tigers, multiple Panzer IVs, self-propelled guns, all under the command of Standartenführer Kurt Meyer. Michael Wittmann volunteered to lead the counterattack. On August 7th, the Sherbrooke Fusiliers received their orders. A squadron would support the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division. Advance at dawn, seize the high ground near Saint-Aignan-de-Cramsnil, and hold it against any counterattack. Intelligence predicted moderate resistance, maybe a few Panzer IVs, possibly a Panther or two. They were wrong. The Germans were sending Tigers, including one commanded by the Wehrmacht's highest-scoring tank ace. Radley Walters didn't know any of this. All he knew was that by dawn on August 8th, his squadron would be positioned behind the stone walls of a chateau in a village called Gimenil. 8 Shermans, 2 of them Fireflies, waited silently for whatever the Germans would send. Walters had no idea he was about to face a living legend. At 0600, he positioned his tanks within the chateau's courtyard. His crews had spent the night knocking firing ports through the thick stone walls. The chateau lay beside Route Nationale 158, with open fields to the east and the village of Saint-Aignan to the north. Perfect lines of fire, but terrible escape routes if anything went wrong. Operation Totalize had begun at midnight, with heavy bombers raining destruction, followed by 6 hours of relentless Allied artillery pounding the German defenses. By dawn, Canadian and British infantry had taken the high ground. The first phase of the operation was going smoothly. German resistance seemed lighter than expected until the radios crackled. Reports of German armor advancing north from Sinti, multiple contacts, heavy tanks. The 12th SS Panzer Division was counterattacking exactly where intelligence had said they wouldn't. Radley Walters peered through his commander's periscope. Dust clouds rose on the horizon. The engines were unmistakable, deep, powerful, nothing like the high-pitched whine of American power plants. Tigers. He could hear them before he even saw them. At 12:30, 7 Tigers crested the hedge near Sinti. They advanced in 2 columns, one moving across the open ground, the other cautiously hugging the tree line to the right. Infantry followed in half-tracks, while Panzer IVs and self-propelled guns brought up the rear. The Tigers were 1,500 yards out, still beyond the effective range of the Sherman 75mm guns, but well within the deadly reach of their 88mm cannons. Walters ordered his squadron to hold fire. Wait, let them close. The Fireflies needed clear shots, while everyone else would have to get lucky. On his left flank, British tanks from the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry lay hidden in orchards northeast of his position. Dug in during the night, they waited among the trees. The Germans were marching straight into a crossfire. They just didn't know it yet. The lead Tiger fired. The first round screamed past the chateau and detonated behind a squadron's position. The German gunner was ranging, testing, trying to pinpoint Allied positions. The second shot came even closer. Fragments of stone erupted from the chateau walls. The Germans had spotted the firing ports. Radley Walters remained calm, waiting. 1,200 yards. 1,100. The math was brutal, but simple. Every second the Tigers rolled closer improved his chances. Every second they survived reduced them. The lead Tiger crept down the terrain, only its turret visible. The commander was skilled, deliberate. 1,000 yards. Walters saw flashes from the British tanks hidden in the orchards. Rounds striking, sparks and smoke in the tree line. One Tiger veered sideways, track damaged. Another pressed on. The German formation began to stretch, reacting to multiple threats. Still deadly, still advancing. At 800 yards, the Tigers started engaging targets aggressively. A British Sherman erupted in flames. Another took a hit through the engine deck. Black smoke billowing, crews scrambling to escape. The Germans were finding their range. Their optics were superior. Their guns were heavier. The Tiger's armor was thick, but Walters had waited for the perfect moment. His eyes locked on the rightmost column. 5 Tigers advancing slower than the rest. The lead tank bore the number 07 on its turret, moving past the chateau. 500 yards. Close enough. Walters gave the order. 8 Shermans unleashed their fire simultaneously. Muzzle flashes lit the stone walls. Smoke, noise, chaos. The lead Tiger on the right shuddered under the impact and ground to a halt. Behind the German formation, an SPG erupted in flames, and a Panzer IV veered off the road. The Germans scrambled, turning to face the new threat, desperately trying to identify targets through the smoke and dust. But Tiger 07 kept advancing, its turret sweeping, searching for the source of the gunfire. Inside that tank sat Michael Wittmann, 143 confirmed kills. Germany's deadliest tank ace, completely unaware that a 24-year-old Canadian major was watching him through a periscope just 400 yards away. At 12:32, one of Walters' Firefly crews fired. The 17-pounder round covered the distance in less than a second. It struck Tiger 07 through the left air intake, just behind the turret. The tank shuddered violently and ground to a halt. Black smoke poured from the engine deck. No crew emerged. The Tiger sat motionless on Route Nationale 158. Walters shifted his focus to the remaining targets. An SPG tried to reverse behind the stalled Tiger. He ordered another salvo. The SPG erupted, ammunition cooking off in a chain of explosions, launching its turret 20 feet into the air. The British tanks, hidden in the orchards, hammered the Tigers from the northeast. The crossfire was deadly. German tanks burned across 500 yards of open ground. The last Tiger in the column took multiple hits and ground to a halt. Another tried to maneuver behind a hedgerow. A firefly from the British squadron caught it broadside. Penetration, catastrophic kill. 3 minutes into the engagement, Tiger 07 detonated. Not a normal fire, a massive explosion hurled its turret off the hull. The blast shook the chateau walls, ignited ammunition storage, and ruptured fuel tanks. The entire vehicle disintegrated in a fireball, sending debris raining across the road. Walters kept his gunners firing. A Panzer IV tried to escape south. 2 Shermans tracked it, hitting the rear deck. Engines roared, fires broke out, and crews scrambled from their tanks. Another Tiger was retreating toward Sinti, track damaged, moving painfully slow. British tanks rained multiple rounds on it. It ground to a halt and ignited. By 12:40, the German counterattack had completely collapsed. 7 Tigers had pushed north, 5 destroyed or disabled. Survivors retreated, Panzer IVs abandoned on the road, SPGs burning. Infantry scattered across the fields. In just 10 minutes of precise, coordinated fire, the 12th SS Panzer Division's assault had been shattered. Walters' squadron suffered minimal damage. No tanks lost. 2 crew members wounded by flying fragments. 1 Sherman damaged by a near miss, but still fully operational. The Fireflies had performed exactly as intended. High-velocity, armor-piercing rounds against heavy German tanks at medium range. It worked. Walters radioed his after-action report to regimental headquarters. 5 enemy tanks destroyed, multiple SPGs and support vehicles eliminated, counterattack repelled. He didn't mention Tiger 07 specifically. It was just another wreck on a road littered with burning German armor. Walters had no idea whose tank he had just destroyed. Unknown to anyone at the time, inside the shattered hull of Tiger 07 lay the remains of SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann, Germany's deadliest tank ace. 143 confirmed kills. Dead at just 30. The Black Baron had been felled by a Canadian squadron he never even knew was there. Wittmann's body wouldn't be discovered until 1983, when road construction crews uncovered the wreckage. Forensic analysis finally confirmed his identity. By then, British tankers from the Northamptonshire Regiment had already claimed credit for his death. Their gunner, Joe Eakins, had destroyed 3 Tigers that day. Everyone assumed one of them was Wittmann's. But battlefield analysis told a different story. The British had been over 1,000 yards away. The Canadians, less than 500. The angle of penetration on Tiger 07 matched the Canadian positions, not the British. The fatal shot had come from Chateau Gemenil, fired by one of Radley Walters' Fireflies. He wouldn't learn this for another 45 years. In 1989, local French civilians approached him during a memorial visit, asking if he remembered August 8, and told him he had killed Michael Wittmann. Walters had never heard the name, didn't know German tank aces, and didn't care. His job had always been simple: destroy German armor. By mid-August 1944, his kill count had reached 14. The Falaise Gap was closing. German forces were trapped, attempting to retreat east, while the Sherbrooke Fusiliers pressed forward through collapsing defensive lines. More Panthers destroyed, more Tigers abandoned. The Wehrmacht was bleeding armor it could not replace. Walters had survived 3 brutal months in Normandy, but the war was far from over. On August 21st, his second Sherman took a Panther round through the turret during fighting near Thury Harcourt, a sharp reminder that luck was never guaranteed. The shell tore through the right side, killing his gunner and wounding Radley Walters in the face and hands. Fragments had ripped open his scalp. 36 stitches later, field medics cleared him to return to duty. He was back in a tank within 2 days. Caribou 3. His crew had stopped naming the Shermans after the first 2 were destroyed. Bad luck. Walters didn't care about names. He cared about crew survival, armor protection, and ammunition safety. Finally, the wet storage modification was arriving. Ammunition racks surrounded by water jackets. It didn't eliminate catastrophic fires after penetration, but it reduced the risk. By August 21st, the Falaise Gap had closed. 50,000 German soldiers surrendered. And thousands more died trying to escape. The roads were clogged with destroyed vehicles, dead horses, and abandoned equipment. Allied fighter bombers turned the retreat into a massacre. Typhoons with rockets, P-47 Thunderbolts with bombs. German armor couldn't move in daylight without being obliterated from above. Radley Walters added 3 more kills during the Falaise fighting. A Panther caught in the open, and 2 Panzer IVs trying to cover the retreat. By this point, Walters had 16 confirmed kills, the highest in the Canadian Armored Corps. The regiment promoted him to lieutenant colonel in the field. At just 24, he was one of the youngest commanders in the Canadian Army. By September, the Allies were advancing into Belgium and Holland. The Sherbrooke Fusiliers rolled through liberated villages, greeted by civilians who threw flowers at the tanks, offered wine, bread, anything they could give. The celebration lasted 3 days, but the respite was brief. The Germans counterattacked near the Scheldt estuary, bringing more Tigers and Panthers. Veteran crews, pulled from the Eastern Front, knew the terrain and used it to deadly effect, relying on ambush and defensive tactics. The easy victories of August were gone. In October, Walters' 3rd Sherman was destroyed, not by a tank, but by a mine. During reconnaissance, his scout car struck a teller mine. The blast threw him 15 feet, knocked him unconscious, killed the driver, and wounded 2 others. When Walters awoke in a field hospital, blood poured from his ears, concussion and a possible skull fracture clouding his mind. Doctors wanted to evacuate him to England, but he refused. Within a week, he returned to the regiment, taking command of Caribou 4. By now, his crews had started calling every Sherman Caribou, no matter what the quartermaster painted on the hull. If Radley Walters was in it, it was Caribou. Simple as that. By November, his kill count reached 17. A Tiger near Nijmegen, destroyed from behind during a German withdrawal. The crew bailed out before the ammunition exploded. Smart. Survival mattered more than heroism. The war was lost. Everyone knew it. Winter came early in 1944. Snow, freezing rain, and mud that stopped tanks better than any mine. The Allied advance slowed. German resistance stiffened. They were defending their homeland, and every kilometer cost more lives. On December 16th, the Germans launched their final major offensive in the West, the Ardennes Offensive, known as the Battle of the Bulge. 50 divisions struck through fog and snow, catching American forces by surprise, destroying hundreds of vehicles and spreading chaos across a 100-mile front. The Sherbrooke Fusiliers were in Holland, too far north to respond immediately. But German probes were spreading, testing defenses and searching for weaknesses. On December 20th, a Panther company struck Canadian positions near Groesbeek. Radley Walters engaged at 700 yards. His gunner fired 3 rounds, 2 hits. The Panther slewed sideways, its turret jammed, the crew abandoning ship. Walters recorded his 18th confirmed kill, the highest of any Western Allied tank commander, a record he would hold for the rest of the war. Yet 5 more months of grueling combat lay ahead. By January 1945, the Sherbrooke Fusiliers were advancing into Germany itself. Rhine River crossings, industrial cities of the Ruhr, villages that looked nothing like France or Belgium. No cheering civilians, no flowers, only silence, fear, and white flags hanging from windows. German resistance was collapsing, not everywhere, not all at once, but the pattern was undeniable. Fewer counterattacks, more surrenders. Tank crews abandoned Panthers and Tigers, stranded without fuel, ammunition, or spare parts. The Wehrmacht was dying from logistical starvation. Radley Walters didn't add to his kill count after December, not because the fighting had stopped, but because German armor had largely vanished. The tanks he did encounter were already disabled, abandoned, or pushed off the roads to clear the way. The Luftwaffe was gone, supply lines shattered, crews exhausted. The once formidable German armored force had finally run out of fight. By this stage, Allied aircraft completely dominated the skies. German armor couldn't move during daylight without being obliterated from above before any ground engagement even began. In March, the Sherbrooke Fusiliers crossed the Rhine, and by April, they advanced through the Ruhr pocket. Thousands of German soldiers were encountered, walking west to surrender to the Americans or Canadians, anything to avoid the Soviets pressing from the east. Most were teenagers or men over 40. The seasoned veterans were dead, imprisoned in the Soviet Union, or scattered across Europe, leaving behind a hollowed-out army struggling to survive. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was finally over. Radley Walters was just 25 years old, a lieutenant colonel commanding a regiment with 18 confirmed tank kills, dozens of other armored vehicles destroyed, 3 Shermans lost under his command, 2 wounds, and 1 concussion. He had survived unimaginable combat, 56 continuous days in Normandy, followed by 9 grueling months across France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany. The Sherbrooke Fusiliers became part of the Allied occupation, performing garrison duties, policing displaced persons, and preventing revenge killings, ensuring order in a continent scarred by war. In July 1945, Radley Walters transitioned to peacetime duties, training replacements who had never seen combat, processing endless paperwork, and adjusting to a life without the adrenaline, terror, and sharp clarity of battle. The Canadian government recognized his extraordinary leadership and bravery, awarding him the Distinguished Service Order and the Military Cross. The citations highlighted specific actions: the assault on Quay in July, the Falaise Gap in August, and multiple other engagements where his tactical decisions not only destroyed superior German armor, but also saved countless lives and ensured infantry objectives were achieved. Radley Walters returned to Canada in 1946 and married Patricia. Together, they raised 4 sons, whom he fondly called the Tank Crew. He remained in the Army, rising steadily through the ranks, serving on peacekeeping missions in Cyprus and Egypt, and eventually becoming commanding officer of the 8th Canadian Hussars in 1957. He attended the NATO Defense College in Paris, earned promotion to colonel, then brigadier general, and retired in 1974 after 34 years of service. France honored him as an officer of the Legion of Honor, while Canada appointed him Commander of Military Merit. In 2004, the town of Biron in Normandy renamed a small park in his honor, Park Radley Walters, complete with a commemorative plaque, benches, and shade trees, a tribute to the man who had helped liberate them 6 decades earlier. Radley Walters passed away on April 21, 2015, at the age of 95. He was laid to rest in St. Paul's Anglican Church Cemetery in Percy, Quebec, near his birthplace. The Globe and Mail called him the most respected battlefield commander in the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps. Military historian Terry Kopp described him as the most famous Canadian tank ace to emerge from Normandy. Yet, for the general public, his name remained virtually unknown. Few outside military circles knew the story of the infantry officer who had never seen a tank before 1942, who destroyed 18 German tanks, survived impossible odds, and helped dismantle the Wehrmacht one battle at a time. His story almost faded into obscurity, like so many others from that brutal war, but not entirely. Sidney Radley Walters' legacy remained largely hidden outside Canada for decades. No Hollywood films, no best-selling books, only regimental histories and military archives recorded his actions. Occasionally, he appeared in academic studies on armored warfare, a footnote in accounts of the Normandy campaign. The debate over Michael Wittmann's death kept his name alive among historians. British veterans insisted Joe Eakins fired the fatal shot, while evidence suggested otherwise, keeping the story alive and contested. Canadian veterans recalled the battles differently. Forensic analysis of Tiger 07 supported the Canadian position. Shorter range, better angles, whole evidence all pointed to Walters' squadron. Yet Radley Walters never claimed the kill, never promoted the controversy. When journalists asked in his later years, his answer was always the same. He destroyed German tanks. That was his duty. Whose tank? What commander? It didn't matter. The war was about survival, protecting his crews, and accomplishing the mission. That mindset defined his career. He never fought for glory, records, or fame. He fought because young men were dying in Shermans outmatched by German armor. Because infantry depended on tank support. Because the mission had to be completed, no matter the odds. His crews remembered him differently from official citations. They recalled a commander who insisted on rest, prioritized crew safety over recklessness, and knew that bringing his people home alive mattered far more than any kill count. The popular video game World of Tanks even created a medal in his honor, the Radley Walters Medal, awarded to players who destroyed 8 or 9 enemy vehicles in a single battle. Millions of players earned it, but most never knew the man behind the name. They didn't know he had started as an infantry officer, learned to operate tanks from manuals, survived 3 tanks destroyed beneath him, and went on to become the top Western Allied tank ace despite never having seen armor before 1942. If this story inspired you, hit that like button. It helps share these incredible, untold stories. Every like helps YouTube share this story with more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Every day we rescue forgotten tales from dusty archives. Stories of tankers who overcame impossible odds with courage, skill, and quick thinking. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment now. Where are you watching from? United States? United Kingdom? Canada? Australia? Our community spans the globe. You're not just a viewer. You're helping keep these memories alive. Share your location. Tell us if a family member served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for making sure Sidney Radley Walters' story isn't lost to history. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're part of that mission.